Have you ever wondered how a single painting can reflect the deepest moral and spiritual questions of life? Jacob Adriaensz Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest doesn't just tell a story, it asks us to examine our place in the grand scheme of divine justice. Are we truly prepared for the ultimate invitation, or will we, too, be cast out into the darkness? Jacob Adriaensz Backer, 1609–1651, was a master of the Dutch Golden Age, an era when art flourished alongside economic and cultural prosperity in the Netherlands. Born in Harlingen, Friesland, Backer trained under notable artists like Lambert Jacobs and Peter Lastman, the latter being a key influence on the young Rembrandt. Backer's artistic journey reflects his deep interest in both portraiture and historical narratives, as he skillfully combined drama and refinement in his works. Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest draws its theme from one of Jesus' teachings, recorded in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22:1-14. The parable is rich in allegory, and Backer's interpretation brings its moral and spiritual dimensions to life. Jesus tells the story of a king who organizes a wedding banquet for his son, a symbol of divine grace and the ultimate celebration of unity between God and humanity. Initially, the king sends invitations to an exclusive group of guests, those who are considered worthy. However, these guests rudely decline the invitation, offering excuses or outright disrespect. Angered by their rejection, the king broadens his invitation, calling upon people from all walks of life to fill the banquet hall. This act of inclusivity symbolizes God's grace extending to everyone, transcending social or spiritual hierarchies. Yet, amid the celebration, the king notices one guest who is improperly dressed, lacking the expected wedding garment. This guest's failure to prepare demonstrates a lack of respect for the occasion, leading to his expulsion into the outer darkness, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. The parable, and by extension Backer's painting, challenges the viewer to reflect on spiritual readiness. It asks, what does it mean to be worthy in the eyes of God? Is it enough to receive the invitation, or does one also need to act upon it with preparation and reverence? Backer's rendition of this parable doesn't merely retell the story, it adds layers of emotional and moral complexity. His depiction of the king radiates authority in divine judgment, while the unworthy guest's posture and expression capture the agony of rejection and regret. By choosing to focus on the moment of expulsion, Backer emphasizes the consequences of failing to honor the invitation, making the painting a visual sermon on accountability. The choice of this subject reflects not only Backer's interest in biblical narratives but also the broader cultural and religious climate of the Dutch Golden Age. In this period, Protestant values emphasized personal responsibility, spiritual discipline, and the readiness to face divine judgment. The parable's themes aligned closely with these ideals, making it a fitting subject for both religious reflection and public discourse. Through this painting, Backer reminds viewers of their own spiritual journeys, urging them to consider how they would respond to the ultimate invitation. Would they come prepared, honoring the occasion, or would they risk being cast out? Backer's work resonates with audiences across centuries because it tackles universal questions about faith, responsibility, and the consequences of one's actions. The painting transcends its time and place, offering a message that feels as urgent and relevant today as it did in the 17th century. By grounding the parable in a visually striking and emotionally charged scene, Backer ensures that its lessons linger long after the viewer has left the canvas. Jacob Adriaensz Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest stands as a remarkable embodiment of the Baroque-era's artistic values. The painting style is a masterclass in visual storytelling, characterized by its emotional depth, dramatic composition, and technical finesse. Let us delve into the intricacies of his approach, which not only captures the parable's message but also enhances its spiritual and moral undertones. Backer's composition is nothing short of theatrical. The arrangement of figures on the canvas creates a sense of movement and tension that draws the viewer into the unfolding drama. The central figures, including the king and the unworthy guest, are carefully placed to command attention. The king, often depicted in a posture of authority and judgment, serves as the visual anchor of the scene. His raised hand or stern gaze conveys the divine verdict being passed. Around him, the wedding guests act as a silent chorus, their expressions ranging from shock to approval, further emphasizing the gravity of the moment. Backer's use of spatial depth enhances this theatricality. The receding lines of the banquet hall or gathering space create a sense of grandeur, making the judgment scene feel monumental. The viewer becomes a participant in the event, as though standing among the guests, witnessing the unworthy guest's expulsion firsthand. One of the hallmarks of Baroque art is the dramatic use of light and shadow, or chiaroscuro, and Backer employs this technique with exceptional skill. In this painting, light serves a dual purpose. First, it directs the viewer's eye to the most critical elements of the scene. The unworthy guest, though humbled and cast out, is illuminated, ensuring that his plight becomes the focal point. The king, as the dispenser of judgment, also basks in a radiant glow, symbolizing divine authority and righteousness. Second, light and shadow work symbolically. The bright areas of the painting represent divine grace, spiritual readiness, and the sanctity of the wedding feast. In contrast, the darker corners symbolize rejection, human folly, and the moral consequences of unpreparedness. The interplay between light and darkness mirrors the spiritual dichotomy at the heart of the parable, reminding viewers of the stakes involved in their own spiritual journeys. Backer's attention to detail is both meticulous and meaningful. Every element of the painting contributes to the narrative, creating a richly textured visual experience. The opulent clothing of the wedding attendees reflects their respect for the occasion and their understanding of its significance. Intricately painted fabrics, adorned with shimmering details, highlight their preparedness and reverence. In stark contrast, the unworthy guest's attire is noticeably plain, even disheveled, underscoring his failure to honor the event. This sharp visual dichotomy drives home the moral of the parable. Backer was renowned for his ability to capture the subtleties of human emotion. In this painting, the expressions of the wedding guests range from pity to judgment, while the unworthy guest's face betrays a mix of shame, fear, and regret. These details make the story come alive, allowing viewers to empathize with the characters. The banquet setting, with its lavish table arrangements, golden chalices, and flowing drapery, serves as a metaphor for divine abundance. At the same time, the stark emptiness surrounding the unworthy guest foreshadows his exclusion from this grace. Backer's artistry is deeply symbolic, inviting viewers to look beyond the surface for deeper meanings. Often depicted pointing or gesturing outward, the king embodies divine authority. His actions remind the viewer of the omniscience and fairness of God's judgment. The unworthy guest's posture. Typically shown slumped or recoiling, the guest's body language symbolizes regret, rejection, and the consequences of spiritual unpreparedness. The wedding feast. More than a setting, the feast represents the kingdom of heaven, where only those who are spiritually prepared may partake. Backer's Baroque brilliance ensures that the parable of the unworthy wedding guest is not just a painting but a profound experience. His theatrical composition captures the viewer's attention, while his mastery of light and shadow evokes an emotional response. The realism and attention to detail ground the narrative in a tangible world, making its moral lesson all the more relatable. Through his artistic style, Backer transforms a biblical parable into a timeless meditation on grace, judgment, and human responsibility. His work invites viewers not only to admire its beauty but also to reflect deeply on their own lives, ensuring that its message resonates across generations. The Dutch Golden Age, spanning the 17th century, was a remarkable period that saw the rise of the Netherlands as a major economic, cultural, and political force in Europe. This era was a time of both extraordinary prosperity and profound change, which significantly influenced the artistic landscape. It was within this unique context that Jacob Adriaensz Backer crafted his masterpiece The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest. To understand the full depth of Backer's work, it is essential to consider the broader historical and cultural context of the Dutch Golden Age. At the heart of this period was a profound economic boom, particularly in trade and commerce. The Netherlands emerged as a global maritime power, with its fleet dominating the seas and its cities thriving as hubs of innovation and wealth. Amsterdam, in particular, became the financial capital of Europe, a city filled with merchants, artists, and intellectuals. However, alongside this economic prosperity, the Dutch Republic was also undergoing a significant cultural transformation. It was a time of increasing social mobility, where wealth was no longer confined to the aristocracy, but was becoming more accessible to the growing middle class. This shift in social dynamics had a profound impact on the art world, as the demand for art from the bourgeoisie, merchants, landowners, and civic leaders rose dramatically. Yet, while the economy flourished, the religious landscape of the Netherlands was in a state of flux. The Protestant Reformation had deeply altered the fabric of society, and the influence of Catholicism had waned. In its place, Protestant values, especially those associated with Calvinism, became a dominant force. This new Protestant ethos emphasized individual responsibility, moral integrity, and spiritual preparedness, values that found their way into the very fabric of Dutch art. In this cultural environment, Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest was not just a visual delight, but also a reflection of the deep moral and spiritual concerns of the time. The Protestant faith, with its focus on personal accountability before God, profoundly influenced the subject matter of Dutch art. The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest was a story that spoke directly to these concerns. The parable, originally told in the Gospel of Matthew, centers on the judgment of a man who comes to a wedding feast without the proper attire, symbolizing the unpreparedness of some individuals to meet the standards required for entry into the kingdom of heaven. This tale was a fitting metaphor for the Calvinist focus on personal virtue and the necessity of spiritual readiness for salvation. At the time, there was a significant focus on individual responsibility, both in religious and social contexts. In a society where the Protestant work ethic was strongly promoted, personal morality and spiritual preparation were seen as essential. The image of the unworthy wedding guest, someone who had failed to honor the divine invitation with the proper attire, served as a powerful visual reminder of the importance of personal readiness and spiritual vigilance. Art in the Dutch Golden Age often carried moral or religious undertones, even in secular subjects. Artists like Backer, working within a largely Protestant society, were not just creating works for decoration, but for moral reflection. The Dutch Republic had a strong Protestant majority, and religious works, though less overtly Catholic in nature, continued to hold great importance. This focus on individual accountability in art was a direct result of the Protestant Reformation, which emphasized the personal relationship between an individual and God, as opposed to relying on the mediation of a church hierarchy. Backer's painting, though it centers on a biblical story, can be seen as part of this broader tradition of art serving as a vehicle for moral instruction. The figures, gestures, and symbolism in the painting all work together to convey a message of spiritual readiness, personal responsibility, and divine judgment. The fact that this message was so strongly aligned with the Protestant ethos of the time is an essential key to understanding the painting's significance in its historical context. In addition to the Protestant emphasis on spiritual preparation, there was also a growing concern about social order and moral conduct in Dutch society. The increasing influence of the middle class brought about an emphasis on propriety, respectability, and personal integrity. As the bourgeoisie became more prominent in the cultural sphere, their desire for art that reflected their values and aspirations grew. They sought works that depicted themes of moral responsibility, social decorum, and, importantly, the idea of the self-made man, someone who earned his place in society through diligence and virtue. The parable's message of exclusion from the divine banquet for the unworthy guest mirrored these concerns, symbolizing the consequences of failing to live up to society's or God's expectations. The unworthy guest, in this context, is not just a figure from a biblical story, but a universal symbol for anyone who neglects their moral and spiritual duties. Whether in a religious, social, or personal context, the painting served as a reminder that failure to meet the standards expected of an individual could result in exclusion from the benefits of the community, be it the heavenly feast or the good standing in society. The Dutch Golden Age was an era of profound change and immense cultural production. The period saw the rise of many great painters, from Rembrandt to Vermeer, and it marked the emergence of a distinctly Dutch artistic tradition. Dutch artists, like Backer, navigated the complex intersection of religious duty, personal morality, and societal expectation, creating works that were both aesthetically stunning and morally instructive. As we examine the parable of the unworthy wedding guest within this historical context, we see how Backer's painting encapsulates the era's religious and social climate. The moral overtones of the work, combined with its technical brilliance, reflect the Dutch Golden Age's legacy of combining artistic innovation with ethical instruction. In conclusion, the painting is more than just a beautiful work of art. It is a cultural artifact that speaks to the values and concerns of 17th-century Dutch society, serving as a visual reflection of the Protestant ideals that shaped the moral fabric of the Netherlands. This painting invites us to look deeper, to reflect on our own spiritual preparedness and moral accountability, just as it would have invited viewers of its time to do the same. Let us now delve into the rich symbolism embedded within Jacob Adriaensz Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest. Every detail in this artwork is infused with meaning, carrying a deeper message that reflects the spiritual, moral, and social concerns of the time. It is in these symbolic elements that we find the true depth of the painting, which invites viewers to reflect on their own lives and their place within a moral framework. One of the most prominent symbols in this painting is the absence of the proper wedding garment, worn by the unworthy guest. In the parable, as told in the Gospel of Matthew, the guest's failure to wear the appropriate attire is a sign of disrespect and unpreparedness for the divine invitation he has received. In the context of the painting, this garment is not simply a piece of clothing, but a metaphor for spiritual readiness. In religious terms, the garment symbolizes purity and virtue, qualities that are required to enter the kingdom of heaven. The absence of this garment, then, is a powerful statement about moral unworthiness. It suggests that this guest, who has come to the feast, has not made the necessary spiritual preparations to be accepted. Just as one must prepare for a formal event with the appropriate attire, so too must one prepare spiritually to enter the presence of God. This idea was deeply resonant in the context of 17th-century Dutch society, which placed a great deal of emphasis on personal responsibility and moral integrity. The Protestant faith, which was so influential in the Dutch Golden Age, emphasized the individual's personal relationship with God. The unworthy guest's failure to properly dress becomes a vivid illustration of spiritual neglect, a stark reminder that there are consequences for failing to live up to divine expectations. In the parable, the king represents divine authority, and he serves as the ultimate judge of who is worthy to partake in the banquet. His presence in the painting is a powerful symbol of God's sovereignty and judgment. He is not merely a monarch in the traditional sense, but a representation of a higher, divine power that governs the moral order of the universe. The guest, on the other hand, symbolizes humanity's flawed nature. He is not evil, but rather unprepared, a symbol of human imperfection and the failure to live up to the standards set by the divine. His presence at the feast, without the appropriate attire, highlights the notion that humanity is often in the presence of divine grace but frequently fails to recognize or honor it. The interaction between the king and the guest is one of judgment, as the king's stern gaze and the unworthy guest's humbled posture suggest. This moment represents the final judgment that each person will face, an idea that was central to Protestant theology. The message is clear: without the necessary spiritual readiness, we cannot expect to receive the rewards that God has promised. This dynamic of judgment is central to the work's moral message. Another striking feature of Backer's painting is the visual contrast between the opulence of the banquet and the unworthiness of the guest. The lavish feast, with its abundance of food, wealth, and beauty, symbolizes the bounty of divine grace and the blessings that are freely offered to all. However, this abundance is juxtaposed against the guest's shabby, unprepared appearance, which creates a stark moral and visual dichotomy. This contrast between wealth and poverty goes beyond mere aesthetics. It serves as a metaphor for the spiritual poverty of the guest, who is unprepared to partake in the feast of divine grace. The guest's failure to dress appropriately represents a lack of respect for the generosity of the king, much like an individual failing to live according to the divine principles that have been freely given to them. By emphasizing the contrast between the guest's unpreparedness and the opulence of the feast, Backer creates a profound moral and spiritual dichotomy. This is not just about a physical event, a wedding banquet, but rather a symbolic representation of the divine invitation to salvation. The guest's failure to embrace the invitation properly suggests that human beings often fail to recognize the spiritual gifts they have been given. At its core, this contrast reminds the viewer that divine grace is not something that can be purchased, earned, or claimed through mere appearance or wealth. It is something that must be approached with genuine spiritual preparedness. The unworthy guest's failure to wear the proper attire is symbolic of those who fail to live according to divine principles, despite being given the opportunity for redemption. As we look deeper into these symbolic elements, it becomes clear that the parable of the unworthy wedding guest is not just a moral tale about a biblical figure, it is a timeless reflection on human nature, divine grace, and the importance of spiritual preparation. Backer's use of symbolism invites us to examine not only the religious context of the time but also the universal truths that transcend historical boundaries. The symbolism within this painting continues to resonate, reminding us of the importance of being spiritually prepared, humble, and attentive to the invitations we are given in life. As viewers, we are asked to look beyond the surface and consider the deeper meanings, much as the people of the Dutch Golden Age would have done. In this sense, the painting speaks not just to its contemporary audience, but to all who encounter it, offering valuable lessons for both the past and the present. Understanding where a painting resides today can be as fascinating as delving into its historical and artistic significance. While the precise whereabouts of the parable of the unworthy wedding guest by Jacob Adriaensz Backer are not definitively recorded, the legacy of this piece, along with Backer's other works, is well preserved in some of the world's most renowned institutions. One likely place where art enthusiasts can connect with Backer's creations is the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. This esteemed museum holds a vast collection of masterpieces from the Dutch Golden Age, serving as a cultural hub where history and artistry converge. Although this particular painting may not currently be on public display, the presence of Backer's other works within the museum's collection allows us to gain insights into his artistic style and themes. The availability of Backer's paintings in such significant collections speaks volumes about his influence and the enduring value of his contributions to art. Institutions like the Rijksmuseum serve a vital role by safeguarding these treasures and making them accessible to scholars, artists, and the general public. Exhibitions often highlight Dutch Golden Age painters, offering visitors an opportunity to immerse themselves in the cultural and historical context of the era. For those unable to visit in person, digital advancements have made it easier to explore Backer's works. Many of his paintings are catalogued in online archives, complete with high-resolution images and detailed descriptions. These resources enable global audiences to engage with his artistry, even from afar. Jacob Adriaensz Backer's The Parable of the Unworthy Wedding Guest transcends its status as a mere work of Baroque art. It serves as a profound dialogue between the viewer and the complex themes of morality, spirituality, and human nature. This painting invites us not just to admire its visual beauty but to reflect deeply on its meaning, to engage with the narrative it portrays, and to question how its lessons apply to our own lives. Through his masterful depiction of the parable of the unworthy wedding guest, Backer presents more than a story from the Bible. He paints a universal truth about the fragility of privilege, the sanctity of humility, and the profound grace offered to those who honor their responsibilities. Each character, each expression, and every detail in the scene works together to pull the viewer into this moral tableau, almost as if we, too, are participants in the feast, silently observing and learning. Backer's ability to bridge the earthly and the divine is unparalleled. The richness of his artistic language speaks to us across centuries, uniting viewers from different eras through shared questions and contemplations. How do we measure up to the ideals of faith and humility? How do we confront our own shortcomings in the presence of grace? These are not just religious questions, they are deeply human ones. The painting also stands as a testament to Backer's technical brilliance and his ability to capture the drama of the human experience. The stark contrasts of light and shadow remind us of the tension between judgment and mercy, between rejection and acceptance. The details of texture and expression pull us closer, almost as if the figures might step out of the canvas to speak with us directly. As we reflect on this extraordinary painting, let us appreciate not only the skill of its creator but also the enduring legacy it leaves behind. Jacob Adriaensz Backer's masterpiece challenges us to think, feel, and grow. It calls us to embrace humility and grace in our own lives while admiring the timeless beauty of art that continues to speak to us, generation after generation.